We are KB and Jasmine, and welcome to Beyond the Silver Screen.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be focusing on, well, a giant of cinema, really, Satyajit Ray. You know, his name, I think anyone who's even a little bit into film knows it. It's synonymous with Indian cinema.
Right.
But you know what? I think it's easy to just say, oh yeah, great director, and move on, right?
All right.
But you sent over so much research about him, and it really makes me think that there's this whole other level to understanding his work, like how his films, they weren't just, standalone pieces of art, but they were really reflections of India, a whole nation changing around him.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the most fascinating things about Ray is how he bridges these two worlds. You know, you have deeply traditional India, rich history, and then you have this very modern Western medium of cinema. And Ray, he's a master of both. But you really can't fully grasp his work without understanding the context, the historical and cultural backdrop of where he came from. And a big part of that is the Bengal Renaissance. It's this period of immense intellectual upheaval in India, really shaped the 19th and 20th centuries.
Okay, yeah, I've read a bit about that. It was like India kind of like rediscovering its own identity while also trying to, grapple with all these new Western ideas flooding in, right?
Exactly. It was a cultural reawakening. It's a time when these figures like Rabindranath Tagore emerged, advocating for social reform, blending, Eastern and Western ideas. And Tagore, his influence on Ray was profound, really shaped his artistic and humanistic vision.
So Tagore, it sounds like he's key here. We're talking about Ray inheriting this legacy of like challenging norms, right? Questioning things, pushing boundaries. Did that come through in his work and how he tackled social issues in his films?
Oh, absolutely. Ray wasn't afraid to, kind of poke at things a bit. He subtly criticized societal ills, things like the rigid caste system, blind faith, all reflecting that reformist spirit we talked about. But, he wasn't just pointing fingers. I mean, his films really delved into the moral dilemmas that individuals faced. He emphasized personal growth, ethical choices, much like Tagore's philosophy, really.
It sounds like he wasn't afraid to make audiences uncomfortable, but he did it with this sense of compassion, like he understood the struggle.
Precisely. And it wasn't just, what his stories were about, it's how he told them. Take his visual storytelling, for example. The deliberate pacing, the way his shots are so carefully composed, those weren't just stylistic choices, they were tools. Tools to capture the nuances of human emotion.
Yeah, I've heard about those long takes he was famous for. Some people, they find them slow, but others say they really draw you in. It's like you become, immersed in that moment. How did he make that work?
Ray, he trusted his audience, He didn't feel the need to rush, to over-explain instead of relying on, tons of quick cuts or tons of dialogue. He really let the visuals, the subtle gestures speak for themselves. It creates this incredible sense of intimacy and realism.
Wow, okay. I got to ask, speaking of visuals, what about the symbolism? I know he used a lot of symbolism in his films. Like, what were some of the recurring motifs, and what do they represent?
Oh, well, trains, for one. Trains are very prominent in his films, especially the Apu Trilogy, which we'll get to, I'm sure. But they symbolize journeys, passage of time, the inevitability of change, the changing landscape of India. He often drew these parallels between individual lives and these larger historical forces, using visual metaphors to really add these layers of meaning to his work.
So it's not just about pretty pictures. It's about, like you said, deeper meaning embedded within those images.
Exactly. He wasn't simply capturing reality. He was crafting this visual language that really spoke to, something much larger, something about the human condition itself.
Wow. Okay. I'm already getting so much more out of his films just thinking about it this way. But, he wasn't all realism, right? I mean, I've heard films like Gupi Gain Baga Bain, which is like this whimsical tale, totally different.
You're right. While Ray is definitely known for his realism, he also embraced fantasy, folklore, drew from, India's rich storytelling traditions. Gupi Gain Baga Bain it's a perfect example. It showcases his versatility, his ability to enchant audiences of all ages, really.
It seems like he was constantly pushing boundaries, blending genres, experimenting with form, never sticking to just one thing.
Yeah, his later works are really a testament to that. As he matured, his focus kind of shifted. He started tackling themes of urban alienation, political corruption, even a sense of disillusionment with post-independence India.
Okay, so those must have been quite a departure from, those earlier, more maybe, I don't know, hopeful films.
Indeed. Films like Pradidwandi, Sima Bada, and Jana Aranya, they reflect this growing cynicism, this feeling that the promises of independence, well, maybe they hadn't been fully realized. But even in those darker films, his humanism, it shines through. You still see his characters grappling with difficult choices in a changing world.
So it's like his filmography itself is a journey, reflecting not just his own artistic evolution, but the evolution of India itself.
Precisely. And that's what makes studying his work so fascinating. It's a lens through which we can understand the complexities of India's transition from tradition to modernity. It's all there.
Okay, before we dive into like specific films and their themes, I want to unpack this Bengal Renaissance a little further. It really seems crucial to understanding Ray's like artistic DNA.
It's more than just, a historical period. It was this cultural earthquake.
Hmm.
Imagine a society questioning its core beliefs, embracing new ideas while also rediscovering its own heritage. That's the energy, the intellectual ferment that fueled the Bengal Renaissance.
And Tagore, he was right at the forefront of this, right? Like, what were some of his key ideas that might have resonated with Ray? I mean, we talked about his influence already, but what specifically?
Well, Tagore, he was a champion of individual freedom, social reform, and this harmonious blend of Eastern and Western cultures. He believed in the power of education, the importance of personal growth, the interconnectedness of all things, really a forward thinker.
Wow. Those are definitely themes that seem to run through Ray's films as well. That exploration of individual struggles within this larger societal context.
Exactly. And don't forget, this was a time when India was still under British rule. The Bengal Renaissance was also about reclaiming, a sense of Indian identity, defining what it meant to be Indian in this rapidly changing world.
So in a way, Ray was carrying that torch, right? Using cinema as this medium to explore these complex issues of identity, tradition, and modernity.
Precisely. He was a product of this cultural awakening, and his films, they became a platform to continue the dialogue, to grapple with these questions on a larger scale for everyone to see.
It's fascinating how a single artist can become like a reflection of an entire nation's journey.
And that's the power of great art. It transcends the individual, becomes a mirror to society, a conversation with history, a testament to the enduring human spirit. It's incredible.
Okay, now speaking of art, let's talk about Ray's visual style. How did he translate, all these complex ideas, emotions onto the screen? What made his approach so unique?
His films are a masterclass in visual storytelling. He understood that cinema wasn't just about recording what was happening, it was about crafting a world, an atmosphere, a feeling.
Yeah, I'm particularly intrigued by his use of long takes like we talked about. Some might find them, slow or uneventful, but I've read they're actually quite captivating. How did he pull that off?
Ray had an incredible faith in his audience. He believed they were intelligent enough to follow his subtle cues, to pick up on the nuances of expression, the unspoken tensions between characters, without it being spelled out for them.
So it's not about bombarding the audience with information, but about inviting them to observe, to feel, to interpret.
Exactly. He used long takes to create a sense of intimacy. Like you said before, you're like a fly on the wall observing life unfold in real time. It forces you to pay attention, to notice the small details, the subtle shifts in emotion that might be missed in a flurry of quick cuts.
And his compositions, too. I've heard they're like paintings, each frame carefully constructed.
He was a master of composition, absolutely. He used light, shadow, framing to create these visually stunning images. But it wasn't just about aesthetics, it was all very deliberate. Every element served the story, guiding the viewer's eye, emphasizing key moments, and creating a mood or atmosphere.
It's like a visual language, then, where every element has a purpose, a meaning.
Precisely. And he often used symbolism and recurring motifs, like we talked about, to add layers of meaning. The trains, for instance, frequently appearing in his films, representing journeys, the passage of time, and the changing landscape of India, all in one image.
Wow. It sounds like he was very deliberate in his choices. Every shot, every frame telling a story. Nothing was by accident.
His visual style, it was an extension of his storytelling. He wasn't just showing you what was happening. He was inviting you to experience it, to feel it on a deeper level.
Okay, but I'm curious, what about music? He was a composer himself, right? How did his music contribute to this whole, experience of his films?
Oh, his music, it was more than just, background noise. It was an integral part of the storytelling. It often reflected the inner lives of his characters, their hopes, fears, joys, sorrows. It added this whole other dimension.
So it wasn't just about setting the mood, it was about adding another layer of emotional depth, right?
Exactly. His scores, they're often very haunting, melancholic, reflecting the complexities of life and the often unfulfilled desires of his characters.
And this whole, like, visual and oral tapestry he created, this unique style, it wasn't just for art's sake, was it? It was a way to tell stories that, reflected the changing world around him.
Precisely. Ray's films, they were a reflection of India in transition, grappling with the legacy of colonialism, the challenges of independence, and the search for a new national identity.
So they weren't just entertainment, they were like a commentary on the times, a reflection of a society in flux.
Exactly. And that's what makes his work so enduring. It's not just about, beautiful images or moving stories. It's about capturing the essence of a particular moment in time, a moment that continues to resonate with audiences even today.
Okay, now before we, delve into specific films and their themes, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk about how Ray's later works. They reflected kind of a shift in his perspective, maybe a move toward darker, more cynical themes. Like, how did that happen?
Well, as Ray matured as a filmmaker, so did India. The initial optimism of independence, it kind of gave way to this more complex reality, one marked by political corruption, social unrest, economic disparities. It wasn't easy.
And his films, they started to reflect that, right?
Yeah.
This disillusionment, this sense of like unfulfilled promises.
Exactly. Films like Pratidwandi, Seema Bada, and Jana Aranya, they explore the darker underbelly of Indian society, the moral compromises people make, the struggles of the disenfranchised, and this growing sense of alienation in a rapidly modernizing world.
Okay, so those sound quite different from, his earlier, more humanist films, like a real shift in tone.
They are, but they're no less compelling. In these later works, Ray confronts the uncomfortable realities of his time, challenging viewers to look beyond the surface and grapple with the complexities of a nation in transition.
So it's like a journey, not just for Ray as an artist, but for Indy as a nation.
Precisely. His films become a chronicle of that journey, reflecting the hopes, the disappointments, the struggles, and the resilience of a people navigating a rapidly changing world.
It's incredible how a single filmmaker can, like, capture the essence of such a vast and complex experience.
And that's the power of Satyajit Ray. He wasn't just a filmmaker. He was a chronicler of his time, a poet of the human condition, and a visionary who continues to inspire generations of artists and audiences worldwide.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some specific films that exemplify, all these themes and styles, starting with the iconic Apu Trilogy.
We'll see how he masterfully weaves together realism, lyricism, and social commentary to create this cinematic tapestry that's both deeply personal and universally resonant. It's really something.
Stay tuned as we continue our exploration of the cinematic world of Satyajit Ray.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Satyajit Ray. Last time we were talking about, we kind of set the stage, right? We explored that whole Bengal Renaissance thing and how much it influenced his whole cinematic vision, really. And of course, we touched on his style, that unique style he had, blending realism and lyricism.
Right. Using those long takes and all the visual symbolism. It was fascinating.
It's like he was painting, but with, light and sound. He created these worlds that felt, real and kind of dreamlike at the same time.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so now I think it's time to actually dive into some specific films, films that really showcase all those qualities. And I'm particularly interested in the Apu Trilogy. I mean, I've heard it's his masterpiece.
You've heard right. It's considered a cornerstone of world cinema, really.
So, like, what's it about?
Well, it traces the life of Apu, our protagonist, from his childhood in rural Bengal all the way to adulthood in, bustling Calcutta.
Okay, so a real coming-of-age story, huh?
You could say that. The first film, Pather Panchali, which translates to Song of the Little Road, it introduces us to young Apu. He's living in this poor village. And the film, it's a real sensory experience, It captures the sights, the sounds, even the smells of rural life.
I've heard that Ray used non-professional actors for this film.
He did. He wanted to capture that rawness, that naturalism of life. And the children especially, they're just captivating. They bring this level of innocence and vulnerability it's really moving.
Oh, and what about that train sequence? I've heard about that.
Yeah.
The arrival of the train in the village.
Well, it's iconic, for sure.
It's got to be more than just, transportation, right?
Precisely. It represents the arrival of modernity, the allure of the outside world, and it really foreshadows Apu's eventual journey away from his rural home.
It's amazing how this one image can carry so much weight, so much symbolic meaning.
It's the power of visual storytelling. And Ray, he was a master. And the train, it becomes this recurring motif throughout the trilogy, marking these key moments of, transition and change in Apu's life.
Okay, so we see him grow up, basically.
We do, we do. The second film, Aparajito, meaning the Unvanquished, it follows Apu as he moves to the holy city of Benares with his family.
Okay, so his world is expanding.
Exactly. He's experiencing new things, facing new challenges, and really grappling with loss and separation.
It's like life is getting real for him.
It is, it is. And there's this scene, this heartbreaking scene where Apu's mother, Sarbashaya, she's watching him leave for Calcutta to pursue his education. You can just feel her sense of loss, her pride, and her quiet acceptance of his, growing independence.
That sounds rough. But, I mean, relatable, right?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that makes the Apu trilogy so enduring. It captures these universal human experiences, love, loss, ambition, the search for meaning. It does it in a way that transcends time and culture. We've all been there in some way.
Okay, so what about the third film?
So the third film, Apur Sansar, meaning the world of Apu, it brings us to Apu as a young man. He's trying to make his way in the world, and he faces, financial hardship, falls in love, and experiences the joys and sorrows of fatherhood.
So he's a full-fledged adult now,
Yeah.
dealing with adult problems.
He is. It's a film about the complexities of adulthood, the responsibilities we take on, the choices we make. And there's this really poignant scene where Apu, he meets his son for the first time. It's after the tragic death of his wife. And it's this moment of, immense grief, but also the dawning of this new kind of love, this new sense of purpose.
Wow, that's a lot to pack into one film.
It is. But the whole trilogy, it takes us on this complete journey, from childhood innocence to the complexities of adulthood. It explores the full spectrum of human experience, really, and it does so with such sensitivity, such poetic observation, and such a deep understanding of the human heart. It's a testament to Ray's skill as a filmmaker and his insight, his profound insight into the human condition.
Yeah, you're making me want to revisit the whole trilogy, see it all with fresh eyes.
I highly recommend it. Now, while the Apu trilogy, it focuses on rural life and that journey from village to city, Ray also explored the complexities of urban India, particularly in films like Charulata.
Okay, I've heard of that one. I've heard it's visually stunning, and it's based on a story by, Rabindranath Tagore, right?
You got it. And it's set in 19th century Calcutta.
So what makes Charulata stand out from, Ray's other work?
Well, Charulata, it's a story about love, longing, and the constraints placed on women in, traditional Indian society. It's a period piece, sure. But the themes, they're timeless, they resonate deeply with contemporary audiences. I mean, it's still relevant today.
And you mentioned its visual beauty. How does Ray's, signature style come through in Charulata?
Oh, his use of composition, his framing, it's masterful. He often places Charu, the protagonist, in doorways and windows, symbolizing her sense of confinement, her yearning for freedom and connection.
It's like he's using that visual language again, right?
Yeah.
To tell us something about her inner world, her desires.
Precisely. There's this one scene where Charu is swinging in the garden, and Amal, her husband's cousin, is reading to her. It's both romantic and melancholic at the same time, full of unspoken longing, the weight of, social
It
conventions.
seems like Ray was a master of capturing those subtle, unspoken emotions, those fleeting glances, the gestures, the things that reveal so much without saying a word.
He understood that sometimes the most powerful stories, they're told in the silences, in the spaces between words. Charulata is a film that lingers in your mind long after you've seen it. It makes you think about, the complexities of human relationships and that enduring power of love and longing.
Okay, so we've got realism, we've got longing. Now, what about that whimsy? We were talking about Goopy Gain Bhagabayan before. That's a total departure, right? It's like pure fantasy.
It is, and it's a pure delight, full of magic, music, and even a bit of social commentary, believe it or not. It tells the story of Goopy, he's this terrible singer, and Bhaga, a terrible drummer, and they're both banished from their villages. And then they embark on this series of magical adventures.
So it sounds like a children's story, but I mean, knowing Ray, there's got to be more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. Ray, he never underestimated the intelligence of his audience, even children. Goopy Gana Bhagabain, it works on multiple levels. It's entertaining, it's visually captivating, but it also subtly critiques societal norms, and explores themes of human folly, the pursuit of happiness. It's a lot going on.
So a film that can be enjoyed by everyone, really, each person taking away something different.
Precisely. It shows his versatility as a filmmaker and that ability he had to weave together entertainment and social commentary. It all feels so effortless and engaging.
Okay, so now let's talk about that shift we mentioned earlier. As Ray's career progressed, his films started reflecting this growing awareness of the complexities and challenges of post-independence India, those darker themes.
It's true. It's true. As India grappled with the realities of independence, things like political corruption, social inequality, economic struggles, Ray's films, they took on this darker, more cynical tone. It was a reflection of the times, I think.
So it's like his films became this mirror, right?
Yeah.
Reflecting the changing landscape of the nation, the hopes, but also the disappointments.
Exactly. Films like Pradidwandi, meaning the adversary, Simabada, meaning company limited, and Jana Aranya, meaning the middleman, they're prime examples of this shift.
They sound, well, intriguing, but also a bit unsettling. What are they about? Like, what are the specific themes and characters?
Well, Prajtandi, it follows this young man, Siddhartha, who's struggling to find a job in Calcutta. He's disillusioned with the political system, frustrated by the lack of opportunities, and just torn between his ideals and the need to survive.
I feel like that's a story that still resonates today.
Oh, absolutely. It captures the angst and uncertainty of a generation, coming of age in a society that's undergoing this rapid transformation. And Ray, he doesn't shy away from exploring those uncomfortable truths. He even uses a more experimental style in Pradidwandi. You see jump cuts, dream sequences, a fragmented narrative, all to reflect Siddhartha's, his inner turmoil.
Wow, so he's pushing the boundaries of his own style, too.
He is. It's like his style is evolving alongside the story, alongside India itself.
Okay, so what about Simabada? What's that one about?
Simabada, it explores corporate greed and the moral compromises people make in the pursuit of success. The film follows Shemal. He's this young executive who's, rapidly climbing the corporate ladder, but it's at the expense of his personal relationships and his own sense of integrity.
So it's like a critique of capitalism, almost, the way it can dehumanize and corrupt people.
Exactly. Ray paints this scathing portrait of corporate culture, exposing the emptiness and alienation that can result from that single-minded focus on profit and advancement.
Okay, and Jana Aranya, that's the last one.
It is, and it's probably Ray's most cynical film.
Really?
It's this searing indictment of corruption and moral decay in Indian society.
Yeah.
The film tells the story of Somnath, this young man who's forced to become a pimp, basically, to succeed in business.
Wow, okay.
It's a bleak, unsettling look at the underbelly of society. But it's a powerful commentary on how systems, they can corrupt individuals, even those who start out with good intentions.
So these later films, they really are a stark contrast to those earlier, more hopeful films. It's kind of sad, in a way.
They are.
Yeah.
They are, but they're no less important. They show us a different side of Ray,
Yeah.
A filmmaker who wasn't afraid to confront the darker aspects of human nature, the failings of society.
It's a reminder that, even in the midst of progress and change, there are always challenges. There are always shadows lurking beneath the surface.
Exactly. And Ray's films, they serve as a reminder to stay vigilant, to question those in power, and to never lose sight of our own moral compass.
Okay, before we move on to Ray's, his enduring legacy and all that, I actually wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier, the documentaries. It's fascinating to me that he wasn't just this master of fiction, but also a skilled documentarian. Like, how did he do both?
He was a master of both, it's true. And his documentaries, they're a testament to his versatility and his deep interest in exploring the world beyond fiction.
So what kind of documentaries did he make?
Well, he made one on Rabindranath Tagore, a beautiful tribute to the poet and his profound influence on Indian culture. And then there's his film on the legendary dancer, Balasaraswati. It's a captivating portrait of an artist at the height of her powers.
It seems like he brought that same, sensitivity, that same insight to his documentaries that he brought to his fictional films.
Absolutely. He understood that whether he was working with, actors or real people, the key was to capture the essence of their humanity, their passions, their struggles, their triumphs. It's all about the human experience.
So through these documentaries, we see Ray kind of expanding his exploration of the human spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Highlighting that creative drive, the dedication to craft, and the the enduring power of artistic expression across different disciplines.
Exactly. And in these films, you see the same meticulous attention to detail, the same evocative imagery and the same profound respect for his subjects that characterize his fictional work.
It's a reminder that Ray wasn't just a great filmmaker, he was a great humanist, a man who was deeply interested in exploring the full spectrum of human experience, from the mundane to the extraordinary.
Precisely. And that's perhaps the most enduring legacy of Satyajit Ray, his ability to find the universal in the particular, to connect us to something larger than ourselves through the power of storytelling.
He showed the world that Indian cinema was more than just, Bollywood musicals. It was a cinema of depth, beauty, and profound human insight. And his films, I mean, they continue to inspire and challenge audiences all around the world.
Now, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll delve into Ray's lasting impact on cinema, his artistic principles, and the ways in which his work continues to resonate with contemporary filmmakers and audiences.
We'll examine the elements of his style that have influenced, generations of filmmakers, and explore how his films continue to serve as this window into understanding India's complex journey from tradition to modernity. It's going to be good.
So stay with us as we wrap up our exploration of the cinematic universe of the one and only Satyajit Ray.
Okay, so welcome back. This is our final dive into the world of Satyajit Ray. We've talked about so much, the Bengal Renaissance, that whole visual style he had, and I mean, all those films that really capture like the heart of India.
And it's important to remember, these films, they're not just for, film buffs or history nerds. They offer something timeless, something that speaks to the human condition. Doesn't matter where you are, when you're watching them, they hit you.
Right, right. It's like, even though he's telling these stories that are so deeply rooted in Indian culture, he's tapping into something universal. We can all relate somehow.
One of the keys to that, I think, is his humanism. Even when he's dealing with, some really heavy themes, poverty, injustice, corruption, his focus always comes back to the individuals, the people navigating those systems. He makes you understand their choices, their complexities, even when you might not agree with them.
It's not about judging, it's about empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the sense that he really believed in people's capacity for both good and bad. He wasn't afraid to show that, the full spectrum of humanity.
Exactly. And that humanism, it's often tied to his understanding of Indian philosophy, too. You can see it in how he portrays interconnectedness, the cyclical nature of life and death, even in films that aren't, overtly spiritual.
It's like those ideas, they become part of the film's texture almost.
Right.
They influence how we see the characters, how we understand their choices.
Right. And then, of course, there's that fascinating blend of realism and lyricism, something we talked about before. He captures the mundane details of life so precisely, but there's always this poetic undercurrent, a beauty in those everyday moments.
Yeah, like that scene in Pather Panchali where the kids are chasing the sweetmeat seller. It's so simple, but it evokes so much. Childhood joy, the fleeting nature of happiness, even the economic realities of their world. It's all there.
Exactly. He wasn't just documenting reality. He was transforming it into art, finding the extraordinary within the ordinary.
And we can't forget about those long takes. I mean, it's so counter to how films are made today, but they work so well in his hands.
That's because he had this immense respect for his audience's intelligence. He trusted them to follow the story, to engage with the nuances, even when things moved at a slower pace.
It's like he's inviting us to be active participants in the storytelling, not just, passive viewers being spoon-fed information.
Precisely. And his use of music, it further adds to that immersive experience. He was a gifted composer, and his scores are they're perfectly woven into the fabric of his films.
Yeah, whether it's those haunting melodies of the Apu Trilogy or the whimsical tunes of Gupi Gaini Bhagabine, his music always serves the story, adding layers of emotion, meaning.
It's not just background noise. It's an integral part of the whole cinematic experience. It enhances the impact of those key moments, and it shapes our emotional response to the characters.
And it's all in service of exploring those larger themes, right? The tensions between tradition and modernity, the clash of individual desires and societal expectations, that search for identity in a world that's constantly changing.
Those are universal themes, they resonate with audiences across cultures and time periods. It's no wonder his films continue to be studied and celebrated worldwide.
Yeah, his legacy, it extends far beyond India. He's considered one of the true giants of cinema. And his influence, you can see it in the works of countless filmmakers, both in India and, all over the world.
He paved the way for a new kind of Indian cinema, one that was both, deeply rooted in its culture and capable of speaking to a global audience.
He showed the world the power of storytelling, the ability of film to transport us, challenge us, make us see the world in a new way.
And he did it all with such artistry, sensitivity, and humanism. It continues to inspire generations of filmmakers and audiences. It's really quite remarkable.
Okay, so as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all this? From this exploration of Satyajit Ray and his work?
I hope they come away with a deeper appreciation of the power of cinema. Its power to transcend boundaries, to connect us across cultures, to illuminate those shared human experiences that unite us all. Ray's films, they're a gift. They're a reminder that even amidst, all the chaos and uncertainty in the world, there's always beauty, there's always hope, and there's always the enduring power of the human spirit.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for guiding us through this incredible journey into the world of Satyajit Ray. I really hope our listeners are inspired to seek out his films, discover their magic for themselves.
It's been my pleasure. And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep letting great art open your mind and heart to the infinite possibilities of the human experience. It's out there.